Was this the most impressive victory of the winning streak yet? We'll talk about it on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use the code all in lowercase LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. The New York Mets are on an absolute roll right now. When your team gets hot, there are always just different ways you win. There's the tight game that you come back late in a 2-1 contest where you flip it 3-2. There's the blowouts, which are always a lot of fun. There's been 3 games of this 7-game winning streak where the Mets have scored 10 or more runs. There's the games where, you hold a close lead the whole way through, and then there's the games that you come back. And the way the Mets came back in this game is what is so impressive. It wasn't just one big rally where the Mets loaded the bases and maybe the other team falls apart with their bullpen and they're walking in runs, or you have a huge grand slam to get you back into it, or a couple of home runs. No, this was a collective team effort over the course of multiple innings to inch, scratch, and claw their way back into a game that they very well could have just accepted a loss on and moved on to the next day. So here's how it all shaked out. Luis Severino had his worst start in a while. The 5th inning, he gave up a 5 spot. It was a brutal inning for Sevy. He gave up 2 home runs, one of them a 3-run shot, 5 runs on 5 hits. Now, prior to that inning, the Mets had scored 2 runs, one of them being on a Mark Vientos home run early. The Rangers had scored one in the 3rd, if I'm not mistaken. So altogether, through 5 innings, Rangers were up 6-2. It was all about that end game. Can the Rangers hold on to a 4-run lead? And what made this, again, so impressive is it was a collective effort, and it was inning by inning, just finding a way to get 1 run closer. In the 6th inning, it was Brandon Nimmo, chipped away, solo homer. That was it. That's all they got. And you got to give Severino credit because he went back out after giving up 5 runs and put up a 1-2-3 6th inning and still gave this team length. 7th inning for the Mets, Mark Vientos and Francisco Alvarez, who we're going to talk about a lot today. Each of them got singles to lead things off against Jose Leclerc, the guy that you might remember if you were watching the playoffs last year, who was lights out throughout the entire World Series run. Well, you struggled this year. He has an ERA of 4.78 after tonight. So a guy that really has contributed to the Rangers not being what they're supposed to this year. And you got to take advantage when you get one of those guys on the hill. Vientos and Alvarez did that to lead off a rally. Mets able to score a run in that inning. Jeff McNeil strikes out after those 2 hits. DJ Stewart comes up as a pinch hitter, and he draws a walk to load the bases. And then David Robertson came on. And honestly, part of having a winning streak is getting some fortunate bounces. And the Mets certainly got one as Robertson got a ground ball that could have been an inning-ending double play off the bat of Francisco Lindor. Could have been a close play at first. Maybe he beats it out. They didn't charge an error on that play, so I'm guessing the timing of that, they're giving Lindor the benefit of the doubt that he would have got there. But really, the first baseman tries to make a play, not the best footwork, trying to make a scoop, hits off the heel of his glove, and you get Lindor safe, and a run comes in that spot. And again, every run counted in this one. So that was 1 run closer again for the Mets. Severino comes back out, gets the first out of the 7th. So even in a game where he gives up 6 runs, he goes 6 1/3. And that's much needed much needed length from your starting pitcher in that spot. Jake Diekman comes on to face Corey Seager. He gets Seager out, and the next guy, final 2 outs of the inning. Mets still hanging in there at 6-4 going into the 8th. And David Robertson went right back out there. If you look at the Rangers bullpen this year, it's been 2 guys that they've been able to trust without a doubt, and that's Robertson and Kirby Yates. And the Mets got to both of them in this game. Robertson strikes out JD Martinez, but Pete Alonso just fights off. I believe it was a cutter. It was a tough pitch down, though. He was able to get a hit up the middle. Starling Marte got the hit as well. So now both of those guys are on for Mark Vientos. He strikes out. But what I will say about Vientos' strikeout in that spot, I felt like it was a good at bat where he fell behind 0-2 and David Robertson spiked a couple of pitches. And in the past, Mark Vientos, the guy that Robertson probably saw for stretches last year, he would have swung through those pitches and given Robertson an easy out. Instead, he spits on those 2 pitches, gets to an even count where Robertson has to come at him. And, credit to Robertson, he made a really good pitch, a cutter just off the plate. And, Vientos tried to swing at it. He missed, but that's a tough pitch that you made Robertson make, which just wears him down a little bit more. And then Francisco Alvarez put together the at-bat of the game, works a full count, and rips a double. Absolutely crushed that pitch. Almost 105 miles per hour off the bat. He hits it into left center field. Both runs come in to score. And just like that, the New York Mets had tied the game. And you just knew that they were going to find a way to win it. And they did. Reed Garrett gives you a perfect 8th inning. He looks great again now that he's no longer forced to be the closer. And Kirby Yates comes on for the 9th, and the Mets were up to the task. Yates had a 1.07 ERA, actually still has a 1.07 ERA, as technically there was an unearned run because of a catcher's interference where Brandon Nimmo drew a walk with 1 out, and JD Martinez reached on the catcher's interference, which pushed Nimmo to second base. But Nimmo probably would have scored anyway when Pete Alonso ripped a double down the left field line, both of his hits on the ground. And to me, it's crazy because Pete Alonso is this slugger who is known for the towering shots. But when Pete Alonso is on, it's those hits that he starts getting. It's the hard ground balls that are finding holes that are allowing him to drive up his average and particularly allow him to drive in runs in RBI spots. Why Pete Alonso had such a good year in 2022 is because it seemed like he always came through with that hit with the runner in scoring position. Or when there's a guy on third base, he hit the sacrifice fly, situational hitting in that spot, not trying to do too much, not trying to hit the 3-run homer, just knowing all you need is a run. All you got to do is get a hit, and Nimmo's going to score from second. He does that, and just a huge moment for Alonso to continue to contribute. Prior 2 games, 7 RBIs. Now a game-winning RBI on top of it. Great game from Pete. But there was no insurance runs, okay? So Edwin Diaz had to go out and nail down a really tough save. He did just that. First batter gets a blue pit on a pop-up that I thought Mark Vientos was going to get to, but he just couldn't quite get there. So that put a runner on first. But Edwin Diaz immediately on the next pitch gets a double play ball. And it was an unbelievable turn by Francisco Lindor and Jose Iglesias. Iglesias came in the game as a pinch hitter late, sparing Jeff McNeil. And he turned such a good double play because he wore it for the team. He fields it. He wanted to make sure he put a good throw on it. He wasn't scared of the runner coming in. He got completely taken out, but he delivered a dime of a throw to first base. And just like that, you have 2 outs, the bases are clear, and all the pressure's off. Brandon Nimmo after the game said it reminded him of his football playing days of the past, seeing a quarterback stay in there, when he's about to get hit and deliver a good dime. That's exactly what Jose Iglesias did. And it was the play of the game because then it was just a fly out and game over. Edwin Diaz is able to retire the side in order. 9 pitches, 7 of them strikes, just going right after guys. That's the Diaz that you know and love. When he trusts his stuff, he's not afraid to attack the zone and, can really make it look easy at times. And that's what that save ended up looking like. So great work by this Mets team to just keep fighting, figuring it out in a game where Francisco Lindor and JD Martinez, who have been the 2 hitters that have most carried the Mets throughout this stretch, for the 2 of them to go 0 for 9 and the Mets to find a way to overcome a 4-run deficit, it's insanely impressive that they're able to pull that off. And I want to talk about how they did a little bit more, highlight the 3 guys that really stepped up. So we'll go through that in just a minute. First, though, a word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, or it brings home the winning trophy. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay's guaranteed fit is only available to U.S. customers. Today's episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. It is the easiest and most exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less than on 2 or more player stats, and you watch the winnings roll in. So maybe for today, you want to look at Francisco Lindor's total bases. He just had an 0 for, I don't know if that's going to hold up. If he has a double, he's going to hit more on 1.5 total bases. If he gets a couple of singles, he's going to hit more on that. So I would take Lindor on my entry. I also look at Mark Vientos, who has crushed left-handed pitching. You got Andrew Heaney on the mound. So you look at Vientos 1.5 for hits, runs, and RBIs. And another name to watch, Ranger Suarez has been one of the best pitchers in baseball, and they got his strikeout at 4.5. So that's 3 different stats that you can look at to take more on. Prize Picks has something for every sports fan, from baseball to basketball, League of Legends, and everything in between. And you can pick across different sports as well. There's quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types, which are what makes Prize Picks the #1 fantasy sports app. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with Prize Picks. The Edmonton Oilers are getting back into the Stanley Cup Finals. If you want to be up to date on all the latest in the world of sports, make sure you check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. I would be remiss if I didn't mention this on today's show, but one of the greatest players in the history of Major League Baseball has passed away. That is Willie Mays. Sad news, and it was good to hear the broadcast really honor him in short order to get the videos together, some of the stories that were told. Keith Hernandez, getting choked up. One of the, or maybe you might call him the best player in the history of New York baseball as well. So a sad day for the baseball world. And I wanted to make sure I acknowledged it at some point on the show today. Getting back to Mets, you look at this game, right? And the comeback that this team had. What stands out to me is it wasn't the same guys that have been doing it, right? It had been Francisco Lindor and JD Martinez. Those 2 guys have been, in my opinion, the leaders that have been driving this run. And obviously, you've gotten contributions up and down the roster throughout this entire stretch, but you always look up and one of those 2 guys typically has a big game. And Francisco Lindor, he did drive in a run, but it was on a ground ball that could have been an inning double play. So they did not have it, but now you're seeing other guys step up. Brandon Nimmo hits a home run. And then the 3 guys I really want to talk about is Pete Alonso, Mark Vientos, and Francisco Alvarez, because Pete Alonso, again, 2 clutch hits late in the game. Just seeing him really have, it's like his head is in it more. Not that he wasn't trying before, but I think this is a guy that has been putting pressure on himself. It feels like ever since he got hurt last year and the Mets season was sort of slipping away from them, and he tried to be Superman and put the team on his back and play through something he probably shouldn't have, and he put up some bad numbers, had a horrible June. The team had a horrible June. I feel like that has really worn on him for a long time. And then ever since the deadline last year, where your name all of a sudden out of nowhere gets floated to be a trade candidate, and you, for the first time, really feel the realities of the business that is baseball. And then you have to hear it all off season. And every single time the Mets lose a game, Pete Alonso's getting traded. Where is he getting traded? Bob Nightingale says a rival executive says he's getting traded here. Oh, this team, that team, and that team would love Pete Alonso. Pete Alonso is going to be the #1 name of the deadline. All of these stories, they continue to sort of tug at his ankles and drag him down. And I feel like the way the team has broken through lately, it's allowed Alonso to release a lot of that and play free and easy and just focus on the task at hand. Really great at bats to get those hits in big spots. The first one to start a rally that resulted in the Mets scoring 2 runs to tie the game in the 8th inning. And he obviously scored one of those 2 runs. And then to drive in the winning run the following inning off the heels of what he's done in the last 2 games. It's a really promising sign of what lies ahead, because Pete Alonso still hasn't had that great week, right? The week when he hits 5-6 home runs. Actually, he might have had a player of the week at some point this season. That's kind of toiling around in my brain now that I have a vague recollection of that. Maybe he did have one of those weeks early in the year, but we know Pete Alonso is capable of having a lot of those weeks and really carrying the lineup for some time. And JD Martinez just did it. And naturally, you're going to cool off. Guys are going to fail 7 out of 10 times at least, and a lot of times even more than that. So it's no surprise that JD Martinez might come back down to earth a little bit. Maybe it's a long weekend in Chicago for him. We really don't know. But Pete Alonso can pick up that slack and drive in runs in that cleanup spot, continue to be a force for the Mets. So it's really good to see him in a good place. And also, again, Nemo with the home run. He has really had a great week after slumping in a really, really big way for a long period of time batting third. But the two guys I really wanted to zero in on for today's show, the guys that if you're watching on YouTube are going to be part of the thumbnail, it's Mark Vientos and Francisco Alvarez, because they've now put together in this series 2 consecutive 3-hit games. And that's not easy to do for 2 guys hitting back-to-back in a lineup to go out and put up 3 hits in each contest. But that's what they did, and every single one of those hits seemed to mean something. Mark Vientos puts the first run on the board with a solo homer in the second. 5th inning, Vientos and Alvarez start off a rally, with each of them getting singles. That ends up resulting in a run scored. 7th inning, they do it again. Lead off an inning with a pair of base hits, score a run. 8th inning, Vientos strikes out, but Francisco Alvarez comes through, has his clutch double that ties the game. 5 of the 7 runs the Mets scored came from either being driven in or scored by Alvarez and Vientos. And now you really look at this lineup, and there's so much ignitability throughout. You have the top, Lindor, Nemo, Martinez, probably your 3 best hitters. They're obviously capable of putting up runs in a hurry. Pete Alonso is right there in the middle, giving you another power threat or the power threat. And then Starling Marte has been great, now batting in that 5th spot. Beyond them, though, you have 6 and 7 of Vientos and Alvarez. And if you think about a first inning, let's just say one guy gets on and he gets stranded, first 4 guys bat. You can lead off with Marte and then go to Vientos and Alvarez as your 1, 2, 3, 4 an upcoming second inning. That's huge, because you look at those 3 guys, any of them can lead the yard, particularly Vientos and Alvarez. And we still haven't even seen Alvarez find his power stroke this season. He's just shaking off the rust right now. And to have a couple 3-hit games this early coming off a lengthy stint on the IL, that is really impressive. And you look at where they're at, with Torrens still giving the Mets a ton of offense whenever he's in there, and also being able to provide some of that off the bench, with Harrison Bader and DJ Stewart sort of combining in an outfield spot that they're getting just enough production. The only hole is Jeff McNeil at second base, and at least he's giving you great defense now. You can swallow a bad offensive performance from a guy a little bit easier if he's at least giving you solid defense inning by inning. And now, whether it's McNeil or Iglesias, it feels like you're getting that defense at second base. And you can only go up with Jeff McNeil. It felt like he was maybe starting to break out of it, had a rough night tonight. Iglesias came on as a pinch hitter. He was intentionally walked, so we didn't really get to see much out of him. He should start against Andrew Heaney, the final game of this series, so that'll be exciting to see what he can do, if he can continue to have a big impact whenever he's in the lineup. But I just look at this Mets team, it feels like a lineup that just makes sense. They put out the starting 9 today, and I said this is the first time the Mets have had a set it and forget it lineup all year, where it's like, all right, this is their group. This is what they roll with. To have that top 4 that we've been talking about with Lindor, Nemo, Martinez, Alonso, Marte batting 5th, Vientos, Alvarez, and then you have McNeil and Bader to round things out, giving you some guys that theoretically should be able to get some hits and get on base for you and be table setters for Lindor at the top of the lineup. I just think the whole thing makes sense, and it's understandable why they have finally found a combination that works that has allowed them to win so many games. And you look at where they're at in the playoff race, half a game out from a wild card spot, 2 games under 500. That's what happens when you win 7 in a row. You can climb out from under 500 very quickly. They win one more in this series. They go in and they win a series in Chicago. By gosh, they'll be over 500. By gosh, that's a weird phrase that I'm not typically one to say. Golly gee willikers. This Mets team has me dating myself way before my time, but I've loved watching this run. How could you not? And I think what makes it even more exciting for me, as much as you like to see the JD Martinezes of the world, and of course the guys they've been watching for a while come through, and Alonso, Nimmo, and Lindor, when you see the kids do it, it just gives you so much optimism, because you're not just thinking about this year, you're thinking about beyond this year. And Alvarez had already solidified himself last year as the starting catcher of the future, but we're getting to the point where you might just have to look at Mark Vientos and say, third baseman of the future, he's arrived. I want to talk about that a little bit more in just a minute. First, though, a word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Policygenius. You never know what can happen in life. That is why it's always best to be prepared. Make sure your family is always taken care of. This is why everyone should have life insurance, but sometimes finding the right policy is not easy. It can be really time consuming and just overall overwhelming. This is where Policygenius comes in. Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace that will save you time and money so you can provide your family with a financial safety net. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. With Policygenius, you can compare quotes from America's top insurers in just a few clicks and find your lowest price with their team of licensed experts who are on hand to help talk you through it. And they will give you unbiased advice, as they have no incentive to recommend one insurer over another, so you can trust their guidance. Check life insurance off your to-do list with policygenius.com. Head to policygenius.com/LockedOnMLB or click the link in the episode description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you can save. That's policygenius.com/LockedOnMLB. Today's episode is also brought to you by Tax Network USA. Here with Locked On Mets, we pride ourselves on getting you the latest news for your team every single day, all year round. You know what else is all year round? Collection season. Just because tax season's over doesn't mean the IRS will stop coming after you for unfiled taxes. The IRS can garnish your wages, levy your bank accounts, and even seize your property. Don't let the IRS target you. Let the licensed professionals and tax experts at Tax Network USA go to bat for you. With over 14 years of experience and an A+ rating by the Better Business Bureau, Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion in tax debt. Whether you owe taxes, have complicated matters that require tax planning, or finally hit that parlay this season and need help correctly filing, call 1-800-549-1000 or visit tnusa.com/lockedon or see the link in this episode's description below. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service. We can get updates anytime some news breaks on the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You get the lineup graphics sent to your phone each day. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Is Mark Vientos the starting third baseman of the future for the New York Mets? He's definitely the starting third baseman of the present, but is this going to extend beyond 2024? Will he be a fixture at the hot corner? I'm starting to buy into it. It's now 112 plate appearance sample size, and Mark Vientos is in 317, 375 on base, 554 slug. I talk about WRC plus a lot on this show. It is weighted runs created plus, measures hitters on a league average of 100. For Vientos, his 166 WRC plus means he's been 66% better than your league average hitter. That is on the cusp, or might actually be, if you sort by 100 plate appearances, the best mark for a third baseman in all of baseball. He has been that good. But what really jumps out to me more than anything, it's been the plate discipline and the way he's gotten the bat on the ball. This is a guy that struck out over 30% of the time last year in the big leagues. If you look back at his minor league career, he jumped right up to Double-A, having skipped High A in 2021 after the lost season of 2020. And he played great, had a 927 OPS, but he had a strikeout rate of 28%. And that continued, having a strikeout rate of at least 28% at each stop throughout his minor league career. He maintained an OPS of 875 or better at every stop, which is really good. But that strikeout rate was always a little bit alarming until last year. Last year in AAA, Mark Vientos had a strikeout rate of 21.6%. So that showed you a semblance of the guy he could be. But again, in the same season, his strikeout rate in the big leagues was over 30%. Now, all of a sudden, you've seen this guy settle in, and there's been countless times where he has a swinging bunt, and it ends up being a huge hit for the Mets. He is just a complete package in the box right now, and he has power that I still think is, sort of untapped. Like, he hasn't even fully lived up to the power that he could provide. I could see him hitting even more home runs in the coming weeks and months. I mean, this guy has that ability to just go on a tear when it comes to the home run ball in a way that few players the Mets have really can. I was comparing Mark Vientos when he was a prospect in 2021 and 2022 to Pete Alonso. Similar track, not really having a position, and a guy that maybe doesn't get nearly enough love for what they do well. And I have always believed that he would eventually be able to hit at the big league level. If you've been listening to this show for years, how many times have I said Mark Vientos has 40 home run power that could be realized in the big leagues? I have harped on that constantly. What I didn't know is where he'd get at bats, and I thought he might be a DH only in the big leagues. What's been the most impressive thing about Mark Vientos is the fact that he has been a league average defender as well. He is grading out as exactly average in defensive runs saved and outs above average. And you look at him in the past, you never would have expected him to be that level of a defender at third base. There's still going to be moments like Brett Beatty at the beginning of the ninth inning, the pop-up that ends up falling in left field. Do I think Brett Beatty would have caught that? Yes. Why do I think that? I've watched Brett Beatty go on a dead-on sprint from third base to the tarps in left field and make catches over the tarps this season. I think Beatty would get a better read on that ball, and he would have made the catch. But I've also seen Mark Vientos turning double plays, fielding every ball that's hit to him, just really doing well. And he has a strong arm to play third base. It's never been a problem. It's been the footwork, his hands. He's worked so diligently at that. And I think the real challenge to Vientos moving forward is to not slow down that work. You got to continue to be at it. You got to sharpen your skills and hone your craft every single offseason, day in, day out, because that's going to keep you at the position. But it really is incredible to see the way this guy's transformed from not making the roster to now being an everyday player and completely grabbing the role from Brett Beatty and, vanquishing him down to AAA. And now you're in a position where you're moving forward. I just don't know what the Mets ultimately do. I know my dad and I have talked about this. It's very similar to Lucas Duda and Ike Davis of the past. To a certain extent, Dom Smith and Pete Alonso was a conversation briefly in 2020, more particularly about who should play first base, who should DH, because 2020, you might remember, in a year where there was no crowds, Dom Smith really put up a great offensive season that he hasn't been able to regain ever since. And there was a moment where we really wondered who was going to be the long-term first baseman. You've seen that at first, at third. You either know or you don't a lot of times with some of these guys, and it's really hard to produce a third base prospect. And we all thought that Brett Beatty was the guy. So to now see Mark Vientos grab it from him, it's been impressive. And moving forward, I just want to see, can he sustain it? Can he continue to ride the peaks and valleys? He just had a rough stretch. All of a sudden, last 2 games, 3 hits a game, home run tonight. He's just come alive again. So I have a lot of confidence in Mark Vientos right now. In the long run, we could talk about Vientos playing first and Beatty playing third. We also might have a conversation at some point, if Vientos keeps this up, of him being so undeniable at the position that they might trade Brett Beatty if they need to get some pieces at the deadline as buyers. That's how much things can change. And Vientos has earned every bit of it with the way he has just been a consistent threat, game over game, week over week, and not only consistent threat offensively, but a stable force defensively at third, something we never really expected would happen in his big league career. So all the credit is to him for putting the work in this offseason to get him in a position to do the things he is defensively, and his continued work with his bat to just become a very complete hitter who can really help a lineup and contribute to a stretch like this. Will the Mets continue it? Can Sham and I deliver against Andrew Heaney? We will see. I will talk to you all after the game on Wednesday on our next show. I also want to get into some all-star conversation. Today, Francisco Lindor and Brandon Nimmo, they were not at the top of the mind, even though Nimmo had the home run, because of how good of a game Vientos and Alvarez had. But I still want to talk about the all-star cases for those two guys, who will probably get to that on tomorrow's show. If you're listening on the audio side, follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. We're trying to make a push to 9,000 subs. I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. You can follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, head over to Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube, giving you all the latest in the world of sports.